Phantastic Phriday, fellow XJ Dubs / Apostates. It's your boy Hawk, here with a little talking squawk. And the topic of this video is about the nutcase who aided my mom into the Jehovah's Witness organization. Sister Victoria Hudson. Oh man, what a wackadoo. Turned my mom into a wackadoo. So as I've stated before in previous videos, my mom started studying with the Jehovah's Witnesses in 1985. I had just turned 2. So I don't really remember how long it was before she started going to the Kingdom Hall once she began studying. But all I remember was it all started when Sister Hudson would come by once a week and they would study out of, I don't even remember what book they studied out of. I know she's told me, but at the time when she started studying, I was too young to remember. You know what I mean? I'm only 2. But I remember she would come by once a week and they would sit down, which seemed like forever, when realistically it was probably maybe an hour to an hour and a half, studying out of whatever publication it was that people were conducting new Bible studies from at that time. All I know is not too much. By the time I was about 3, we were going to the Kingdom Hall regularly. Thursday nights for the Theocratic Ministry School and Service meeting, and Sunday for the public talk in the Watchtower. At first, we wasn't going to the Tuesday night book study. That was maybe a little bit later. I was probably about 3. Around that time when we first started going to book study. All I know is that the book study was the most cringiest, boringest out of the 3. I mean, they were all boring and cringy. But it was just something about sitting in somebody's living room for an hour. And it's funny because the book study, you would think would be most people's favorite meeting, seeing how it was only about an hour versus sitting in the Kingdom Hall for 2 hours. Maybe it was the close, like being so close up, and I don't know what it was, but anyway, by the time I was 3, we were going to all 5 weekly meetings on those 3 days: Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. Now, as far as field service, I don't really remember. Matter of fact, at first when my mom started going out in a field ministry on Saturday mornings, she didn't take me out. Stayed home with my pop, my older brothers, would watch cartoons, you know what I mean, whatever games was on, because my pop and brothers, they was heavy into the sports. So I got to enjoy that. I didn't start going out in the field ministry till I was a little older, like 5 or 6. By that time, my mom was baptized. But anyway, Sister Victoria Hudson, she had just gotten married when she started studying with my mom, and they kind of became like an extended family, because my mom and Sister Hudson, they were real close. My mom didn't have any sisters, so they kind of became like sisters. Like, they would always come over we would go over to whatever family functions their family had. My mom would invite her to our family reunions and stuff like that. So she kind of became like a aunt. You know, we was all close for the first few years. You know, my mom got baptized in the summer of '88. About a month before my sister was born and a couple of months before I turned 5. So it happened about around like 91 or something, where my mom and Sister Hudson, after being so close for the past 5 or 6 years, they had a falling out. Because Sister Hudson thought she could chastise me during a meeting. And I remember my mom had a part on a theocratic ministry school with another sister. So at this time, we used to always sit together at the meetings. Being how Hudson was the one that aided my mom into the truth, as they call it. So during the meeting, I'm fidgeting, I'm 8 years old. Trying to sit still throughout the whole meetings was always challenging, especially for a kid like me who wasn't really paying attention to what was going on anyway. So Sister Hudson thought she could chastise me. So I got loud with her. Then I got up and walked out the auditorium to the lobby. She had the nerve to come out after me and tell me that she was going to tell my mom that I would be disciplined and all that. So I started cussing at her. Like, fuck you, lady, whatever, you bitch. So then one of the, matter of fact, it was my uncle. My uncle and aunt, they had just got baptized. So he had just so happened to be coming out the bathroom. He didn't grip me up, but he kind of like put his hand on my shoulder and guided me outside and was telling me to be a good kid, whatever, and to come sit with him and my cousins for the remainder of the meeting. I was like, all right, cool, because my cousin was a year younger than me, and we was always like best friends anyway. So I got to sit with them throughout the rest of the meeting. But after the meeting, Sister Hudson had the nerve to come up to me again and called herself trying to discipline me. So I took my little service bag that contained like my little book of Bible stories, my song book, my Bible, had the young people ass book in there. So I took the bag and swung it at her a couple of times, hitting her. You know, my mom, she took me into the bathroom, gave me a spanking, whatever, but at that point, her and Sister Hudson, that kind of led to them having a falling out. Like, they were no longer close, no longer invited one another to each other's functions. And even though my mom tried to be the bigger person, Sister Hudson held a grudge, for at least the next decade. They kind of rekindled somewhat, but it would never get back to anywhere where it was. And this was only because they shared a mutual friend. You know, this sister I'm not going to put her name out there, she became like my mom's best friend. All I'll say was that before this sister joined the cult, she was a backup singer and dancer for a lot of famous artists like James Brown, Tina Turner, Aretha Franklin, whatever. She was in the industry for a bit, like as a backup singer and dancer before she joined the cult. She was kind of the one that eventually mended somewhat of the friendship between Mom and Sister Hudson. Well, as I said, it would never go back to where it was. Now, a few years after the falling out, the Hudsons, they welcomed the baby boy. You know, it was their first child. Now, when he was first born, you know, it's a new baby. For those that know, that grew up in that or was around in a cult or whatever, whenever a new baby is born in an organization, it's like a big deal. Like, they have a baby shower, which of course we wasn't invited to. But when the baby was finally born and they brought him to the hall for the first time, you know, all the friends wanted to see the new baby. All the other kids kind of wanted to hold him for a little bit. But when I tried to hold him, because, you know, even after that incident, I didn't like Sister Hudson for how she treated my mom. Like, my mom would try to speak to her, and she would be like real standoffish or whatever. I mean, I didn't like her for that, but when she had a baby, it's like, all right, I see my cousin and all my other little peers having a chance to hold the baby, so I tried to hold him. She was like, oh no, you can't hold him or whatever. I was like, oh well, it is what it is. But anyway, their son Jeffrey, he was autistic. You know, so having an autistic child, that was a lot to deal with. So Sister Hudson still, as Jeffrey gets a little older or whatever, you know what I mean, he's a behavior problem, but he can't help it being on the spectrum or whatever. So Sister Hudson, still in her feelings, would always try to take digs at me by saying how, oh, I was just like Jeffrey when I was younger. Like, how? I was never autistic. Yeah, I had behavior problems, but as I stated in my previous video, that was a direct result of my mom and that cult. But I was always a normal, functioning child. I could talk. I didn't make sounds. Again, that's no disrespect to little Jeffrey or any other child with autism. But to say that, to try to make it seem like I was on the spectrum or whatever, was just flat out disrespectful. But what pissed me off was that my mom would never stand up for me or say anything except stupid shit like, well, you did have behavior problems. I said, oh, I get it. You know what I mean? You're mad because my dad is my favorite parent compared to you. So now you're using that as a reason to take shots at me too. But Sister Hudson would always say little shit like that. Now, by this time, I'm a teenager. So one day after the meeting, me, my cousin, and my two homies, we're talking about whatever. And Jeffrey's running around, whatever. His parents have a hard time controlling them. He runs up from behind me and grabs me by my private area. So, of course, actually, I jumped like, yo. And without even seeing who it was, I turned around and swung. I mean, it was a natural defense reaction. I'm like, somebody's trying to grab me in my private area, But I didn't realize it was him until after the fact. So Sister Hudson, she starts snapping and yelling. It was like, oh, you had behavior problems. You had problems when you was a kid. You was just like him. I didn't cuss her out, but I told her about herself right then and there. And I'm not ashamed to admit. I mean, I'm not so much ashamed, but I feel bad for what I said, but out of anger and embarrassment for her trying to make it seem like I was something that I never was, I said, listen, your kid is the R word. I'm not going to say the word, but you know what they would call people with autism. It's the word that they used way back before autism was such a thing. I said, your kid is the R word. RETAR, you know the rest. You know what I mean? It wasn't right for me to say that, but I was angry for the fact that she tried to play me. I said, I was never the R word. You know what I mean? Yeah, I was a bad kid, but a lot of kids was bad. So for you to try to make it seem like that, you're still butthurt. I didn't use the word butthurt. I said, but you're still in your feelings over something that happened 10 years ago. I said, and I said, don't you ever in your life compare me to him again. You know what I mean? If you do, I'm going to go off even worse. Of course, the elders came over. My uncle, he was the elder at this time. He kind of pulled me to the side like, and he knew because he remembered the whole ordeal from a decade earlier. He was like, you know, the Hudson's there, cuckoo or whatever. Now, Sister Hudson, she did have issues. Because not only did she have an issue with my mom, she had issues with other sisters in the congregation for no reason. Or for reasons that really didn't make any sense. So the next day, Sister Hudson, she calls my mom crying and how I've always been mean to Jeffrey, which wasn't the case whatsoever. Because even though I went off and called him the R word and all that, like I was never just mean to a kid like in that predicament. So for her to say that was just, but yeah, Sister Victoria Hudson, a cuckoo. Now in the same year of that incident where little Jeffrey grabbed me by the jewels, the family jewels, was the same year that one of the sisters had just graduated from high school. Now, as we all know, J-Dubs were forbidden to go to their prom or anything like that. So instead, since she was graduating and since she didn't go on her prom, her parents threw a formal for her. It was real nice, too. They threw a formal for her that summer of 2002. Matter of fact, let's backtrack. The formal incident happened before the incident where I snapped at the little Jeffrey grabbed me in a forbidden place. The formal incident was the summer before. But you know, our parents went all out for her formal. So my mom opened our house for us to have, well, so they could practice and rehearse for the formal and everything. Now, I don't really remember what happened because me, my cousin, and my homies, we was out playing basketball. And we just, like, my house was kind of like the meetup spot for me and my crew because we had the finished basement. You know what I mean? I had all the video games. And out of all of my J-Dub peers, my house was the house where you could kind of come and kind of let your hair down a little bit, as they would say. You know, we would have girls over. You know what I mean? Sometimes we'd smoke out weed or whatever for those in my crew that did smoke. But anyway, we come back from playing basketball, or they're rehearsing or whatever. Next thing I know, Sister Hudson, she just starts snapping on everybody, like, and I don't really remember why, but she started going off on everybody, and my mom trying to diffuse the situation, she starts going off on my mom. Now my mom, despite being brainwashed and manipulated by the cult, my mom would get gully. That's another word for gangster, if need be. Like if somebody was coming at her sideways, like Sister Hudson was. Now, remind you, Mom already got triggered because of their past history. So she starts going off, and the sister that's the mutual friend, the one that used to be the backup singer and dancer, she's trying to diffuse the situation now. My mom starts yelling at her. It just became a real big thing, all because of Sister Hudson. Next thing you know, the elders get involved, and Sister Hudson excluded from the rest of the activities, and they're not allowed to come to the formal. So that became a big thing. And I think that's why when little Jeffrey touched me in that area and I went off, I think that's the reason why Hudson went off the way she did. So, you know what I mean? That was that. Over the next couple years, Sister Hudson, she held grudges toward everybody that was involved with the formal proceedings. You know, little Jeffrey, he's growing, but, you know, he still has the problems or whatever, and it's like he gets worse and even more hard to handle, and people are scared to say something because of how Sister Hudson reacts. Now, the last time I've seen her was in 2009 when I attended the Kingdom Hall for the very last time at Memorial. You know, at this time, you know what I mean, my baptism was already annulled. I only showed up because I had so happened to see my uncle in the barbershop earlier that day, and he kind of talked me into going. I said, all right, I'll show up for this one last time. But Hudson looked at me with disgust. And, you know, that was the last time I seen her. But that was a little Talk and Squawk with your boy Hawk. So, don't forget, for those of you that's new to the channel, subscribe so you could get more Talk and Squawk from your boy Hawk. Hawk out.